So now today in this session we are going to discuss about what is Windows PowerShell, how does it helps us in day-to-day automation, and what is the basic architecture, what are the fundamentals of the Windows PowerShell, and why we should learn PowerShell, and so on. Let's move on. Yeah. So this is this session, and these are the topics that we are going to discuss about all today. So we are going to discuss about what is PowerShell and why you should learn PowerShell, who should compulsory learn PowerShell, and can I learn PowerShell without any programming experience, or is there any requirement to learn PowerShell, and what are the best ways to learn PowerShell and become an expert in it, and what makes PowerShell unique when compared with other scripting tools like DOS, Python, etc. And what is PowerShell architecture, its command legs, and how to start a basic PowerShell program, and everything today we are going to see. Okay, so before learning any new course, okay, maybe it can be either Java or .NET or anything, we have to identify why we should learn a new course, or what is there in the new course, and really how does it helps us in day-to-day automation. Then only we can really understand the real capabilities and the real futures of that particular technology, and we can implement in a full-fledged way in our day-to-day projects. Right. So just I want to ask you why you want to learn PowerShell. So are you going to do any automation in the PowerShell, or are you going to do any of your migrations in your project? And I also want to ask you, what is your role in your current project? Are you a development engineer? Are you a test engineer? Are you a project engineer? Are you a DB administrator, build and release administrator, SharePoint administrator? So what is your role? We have to identify, and depending upon the role, really this PowerShell helps a lot in doing automation. Okay, let's move on. Yeah. So before introducing further, before discussing about the further, I will introduce about myself. So I am Krishna. I am almost having 10 years of IT experience, and I have been full-fledged working on this PowerShell from almost last 10 years. So I have worked on different roles in my career, like I have done many of IAS deployments. I have done the build and release engineering automation with the PowerShell. I have done the Azure deployments. I have done the AWS deployments and the infrastructure maintenance, SharePoint administration, database administration, and Windows day-to-day activity administrations, TFS administration, everything. So I am going to teach you, or I am going to train you all my 10 years of experience in PowerShell to you in this session. Okay. So there are two ways to learn any new technology, right? One is through online, and the another one is through any trainer or through any guidance. In the first way, if you learn through any online videos, through YouTube videos or anything, we will get the subject, we will get the technical stuff, but we may not get the real-time experience, but we may not get the real-time scenarios, right? But when you go for the second option, maybe a trainer option, then definitely we will be getting all the real-time scenarios. How we should use a particular scenario, and when we should use a particular scenario, what we should do if you really get a roadblock in one issue. Everything will come to know. So those are nothing but the best practices of implementing a feature in fixing a particular fix, right? So I am going to deliver definitely all my experience, and I am going to tell you all my knowledge, whatever gain, and I am going to teach you, and I am going to make you from a basic level programmer to an expert level programmer, definitely in the PowerShell. I have that much of confidence. Okay. So I mean, when I'm telling you about the trainer, we are not asking you to learn from only from our institute. I'm telling you in a general way. Okay. Let's move on. Yeah. So before learning the PowerShell, okay, we have to identify where we are. So are you a beginner to the PowerShell? Beginner in this sense, I am going to ask you, have you written any of the Windows PowerShell scripts previously? Or have you debugged any of your PowerShell files previously? Do you have any experience in the Windows PowerShell previously? So if you don't have any experience, and if you are completely starting the PowerShell now itself, then I will consider you as a beginner, right? If you have already a bit of experience in the PowerShell, and if you have already written some kind of PowerShell files, and if you have already seen some of the PowerShell files in your projects, then I will consider you as an advanced level programmer. And if you have already know the PowerShell, and if you have written many of your PowerShell files, and if you can able to review the other people's PowerShell code, and if you can able to fix the issues in other people's code, then I will be considering you as an expert level programmer. So why I am telling you this beginner level, advanced level, expert level means it really helps us in understanding where we are and how we have to learn PowerShell and how we should fix our roadmap to learn the PowerShell. I will tell you an example. When I start, I'm working on my one of my projects in my company. It is a fully PowerShell based role. Okay, in that I'm having almost hundreds of PowerShell files, where each PowerShell file is having almost thousands of PowerShell lines of code. And definitely, if you have any of your projects, definitely it will be thousands of lines of code in your projects. Okay, so then the biggest challenge is for me, first of all, to understand the code. First of all, we have to understand why we have so many of PowerShell files and what is there in the PowerShell files, right? Because if some PowerShell logic, if some functionality or logic is already there in the PowerShell file, we can definitely utilize in one of our requirements. And also we should understand the dependency, and also we should understand the flow of control. So which function we are calling, function 1, function 2, function 3, function 4, and which PowerShell file we are first of all utilizing, because there are multiple PowerShell files and there will be definitely a dependency across the PowerShell files, right? We have to understand them. So then I have spent so much of time and to each particular file, and I have completely understood what is there in each and every file, and how many functions are there, what each function will do, what each function will take, what input parameters will each function will take, and what are the dependencies across the functions, and what are the dependencies across the PowerShell files. We have to understand all this stuff. Then it will be a clear-cut idea for you to fix any issue, right? Let's say, for example, if you are a build and release engineer, okay, so as a build and release engineer, you will be having, you have to deploy some web code into the IIS, you have to deploy some database code into the IIS, and maybe you have to deploy some SharePoint logic into the SharePoint server, etc., right? So if your Jenkins job or if your automation job when doing the deployment is failing, then definitely you should be in a position to go and fix which file, which logic you have to fix it, right? So that's why what my suggestion is, if at all there are any of your PowerShell files in your project currently existing, I recommend you to spend some time and understand their code. By understanding their code, you will learn so much of stuff. You will learn the PowerShell syntaxes. You will learn the dependencies of the PowerShell functions. You will learn the dependencies of the PowerShell files. you will learn what are the parameters that we are passing to each and every function. You will learn, and you will come to know what are the dependencies in executing a PowerShell file. All this stuff you will come to know. So if at all there are any PowerShell files existing in your current project, I recommend you to spend some time to go through them, to understand them. That will really help you a lot. Okay, because see, as a beginner, let's say for example, if you are writing a small program, it may take you 1 hour, a small program. Okay, maybe fixing some Windows services issue on the multiple servers, right? If you are an advanced program, you may take 30 minutes, right? And if you are an expert level programmer, you may take 10 minutes, because the level of expertise will definitely matters the time that you are consuming, right? Because once if you know theoretical knowledge of the PowerShell, once if you know the real-time experience of the PowerShell, then definitely the time that you are taking will be significantly reduced, and you will get a good confidence in writing the PowerShell files or in fixing the any issues. So no matter what level you are currently, maybe a beginner or advanced or expert, just to follow the slides and my curriculum, my training videos, definitely I will make you an expert level programmer in the PowerShell with all the best practices, with all the known issues, with all the dependencies and everything. I'm going to give you full knowledge of all my 10 years of experience and across the Windows PowerShell technologies. I'm going to give you the full knowledge to all of you. So just worry about this level. Just understand about yourself. That is what I am going to finally say. Okay? Yeah, let's move on. Yes. So this is one of the slide which I am really much interested to discuss about. So before learning PowerShell, we have to identify what we are in respect of technology, role. So are you a development engineer, or are you a test engineer, are you a project management engineer, or are you a build and release engineer, or nowadays are you a DevOps or cloud engineer? We have to identify where we are, because let's say for example, if you are coming with a development background, obviously we will be knowing the syntaxes, right? We will be knowing the syntaxes of the arrays, hash tables, for each loops, while loops, do while loops, and we know the logic, how to use them. So what we have to learn is only syntaxes. So if you learn the syntaxes, definitely it will be easy for you, right? But syntaxes also matters, because let's say for example, if you are coming from a .NET background, right, the way how we call a function there and the way how we call the function in the PowerShell is different. So that is what we call it as a syntaxes, right? Because in the initial days, I also have a development background. When I directly switch from a development background to the PowerShell automation, I struggled a lot, because I was in an impression that the way how we call the functions in the .NET is similar to the PowerShell, and I am trying to call in the same way, and I am getting so many errors. So the syntaxes are different, obviously. So we have to learn the syntaxes and move on. So if you are coming from a development background, just spend some time on the syntaxes and move on. So if you are coming from a test engineer automation perspective, the same thing. So we have to spend on syntaxes. We have to spend on syntaxes learning and move further. Next, if you are coming from a project management perspective, so why I am asking if you are coming from a project management means, nowadays because of all these cloud ops and because of all these DevOps, because of all these cloud migrations, each and every manager is also very much interested in learning the PowerShell. And also in understanding what is really there in the PowerShell and how does it help the total project at a high level. So as a project manager, you have to identify what are the real core capability of the PowerShell and how does it help the automation. Okay, And if you are a build and release engineer, definitely you might be knowing already the PowerShell, because we heavily use PowerShell for the build and release engineers. It could be a TFS builds, it could be a building of an application and preparing for a deployment, or it could be a building of a Windows image for deploying for the new instances. And for the release engineers, maybe if you are using already the Jenkins, if you are using Octopus, or if you are using any IBM BuildForge, we heavily use PowerShell for day-to-day our activities. So what you have to understand is, just you spend some time on the best practices of the PowerShell, because I believe that you already know the PowerShell. You have to understand the best practice of the PowerShell, and definitely you can reach the expert level. Now finally, the DevOps or cloud engineers. So these are the terms that we are listening nowadays, right? The DevOps or cloud engineers. For the DevOps or cloud engineers, the PowerShell is compulsory if at all you are working on a Windows platform, and also if you are working on the AWS cloud platform or Azure platform, even that matters. Because nowadays all the cloud platforms, if you are working, means definitely you have to learn PowerShell. That is a must and technology, because each and every provider, let's say for example Microsoft Azure or the AWS, each and every cloud provider is providing API interfaces to communicate or to administrating their cloud technology. So that API is through PowerShell. So if you learn the PowerShell, it is very much easy for you to administration the Azure cloud platform and also the AWS cloud platform. Because I have worked on both, so I have written so many PowerShell files in administrating the Azure and in the AWS. So all this stuff we are going to discuss about further levels as well. So what I am going to tell you in this slide is that just understand where you are and spend time in that to reach an expert level in the PowerShell. Okay, let's move on. Yes. So now we are going to discuss about the basics of the PowerShell. In this session, in this first session, we are going to discuss about the fundamentals, very basic fundamentals, and what is really there in the PowerShell to learn, and we are going to discuss about. Okay, let's see the first point. So PowerShell is a command line and task based scripting tool, right? So if you learn the PowerShell, you can execute the PowerShell programs or PowerShell files from a command line. So I believe obviously you know the batch files, right? The batch files we will execute from the command prompt. In the similar way, we will execute the PowerShell files from the PowerShell command prompt. And it is also a task based scripting tool. So like any other scripting tool, like Windows batch files or Python, PowerShell is also a task-based scripting tool. So the first point applies to all the scripting tools. Either could be a DOS batch files, or it could be a Python, or it could be a PowerShell. Okay, next. Framework is based on the .NET. So PowerShell framework is built upon the .NET framework. So this is very a great future for the PowerShell. Okay, because since PowerShell framework is built upon the .NET framework, we can utilize all the components of Microsoft platform, right? Let's say for example Microsoft Active Directories, the DNS components, the DHCP components, the registry components, the Windows file systems, the Exchange servers, and everything whatsoever. So I mean to say that in this point, on a Windows platform, you can access each and everything with the PowerShell. Either it could be a client operating system or it could be a server operating system. If at all you are using a PowerShell on a Windows platform, you can access each and everything on the Windows platform. Why? Because since PowerShell is built upon the .NET framework. Okay, next, everything is an object in the PowerShell. This is a very great feature, I can say, because in PowerShell everything is an object, we treat it as. So this point makes the PowerShell different from DOS and the Python and any other scripting languages. Because in the PowerShell, when you call a function, let's say for example, when you call a get-service commandlet, it will return a list of services objects. When you call a get-process, it will return a list of processes objects. When you call a commandlet like get-database, it will return a list of databases directly, database objects directly. So what is the advantage of this one? When PowerShell is returning all the objects directly. When PowerShell is returning all the objects directly, it is very easy for you, right? Because you can see what are the data members, you can see what are its properties, and you can see what are the functions of those objects, and you can directly do the operations. Let's say for example get-service. It is returning all the services. If you want to stop all the services, we will simply call it as .stop method and will stop a service. But whereas the same program, if you write in a DOS batch files, what will happen? When you call a get-service or equivalent logic there, it will return the list of the services, but not in the object format. It will return in the plain text format, right? Again you have to process that particular output, and again you have to query the Windows service, and again you have to get that particular service and call that stop. So in a Windows batch files, it will be completely the text processing. The Windows batch file is a text processing, but Windows PowerShell is a object processing. This is a very great feature that makes PowerShell unique when compared with all the scripting languages. And we are going to discuss about all these objects and everything in upcoming sessions too. Okay. Next, remote programs and features. See, with the PowerShell, we not only able to perform the administration activities on the local machine, and also allows to perform the activities on the remote machines. This point is very important and helpful for all the administrators, right? Maybe you are a DB administrator, or a Windows Server administrator, or a Azure administrator, SharePoint administrator, IAS administrator, deployment administrator, Active Directory administrator, anything to that matter. If at all you are using as if at all you are working as an administrator, I believe definitely we have to deal with multiple servers, right? Maybe 20 servers, 50 servers, 100 servers, and so on. So PowerShell allows us to perform an operation directly on the remote machines without logging in from a single point of program. So this is very useful, and it will save a hell lot of time. Let's say for example, if you are a IAS engineer, and if you have a 20 servers in your production environment where you have to create the websites, the application pools, the certificates, and so on. If there is no PowerShell and if there is no automation, you have to log into each and every server, 20 servers. You have to create the application pool, you have to set the application pool name and its properties, you have to create the website, you have to import the certificate, you have to map the certificate to the IAS, right? In how many servers? All 20 servers. Without automation, without PowerShell, right? It is so much time consuming and error prone. Anyway, nowadays those days are already gone. Now there is no company and there is no project, I can tell you, which is depending on the manual deployments. Each and every company, each and every project, each and every individual is going for automation. That's why they are learning PowerShell or any particular technology, right? So with the Windows PowerShell, we have the ability to perform the operations on the remote machines. Next. So in Windows PowerShell, we have PowerShell commandlet. So a commandlet is nothing but a Windows PowerShell program. Okay, a commandlet is nothing but a Windows PowerShell program. So in the PowerShell, we have many predefined commandlets. Let's say get-service. It will list all the services running on a machine. Get-process. It will return all the list of the processes running on a server. In that way, Microsoft has already given so many commandlets to utilize for day-to-day operations. So not only Microsoft, each and every third-party provider, let's say for example Microsoft Azure or AWS or any other particular NetApp, right? NetApp. Every third party is providing the predefined commandlets to interact with their platforms. Okay, I will tell you an example in terms of AWS. If you are using AWS EC2 instances, they will provide get-EC2 instance, get-EC2 instance status, like that. So they are already providing the commandlets. So what we have to do? We have to simply use those commandlets and proceed to our operation. So a commandlet is nothing but a PowerShell program. Okay. So similarly, PowerShell functions. Okay. So PowerShell functions also allows us to perform an operation very repeatedly, and we can achieve our task. Right. Next, it can access the .NET Framework API. So as I told you that since PowerShell is built upon the .NET Framework, we can consume all the API components. We can consume all API calls. I mean to say that, so with the PowerShell, you can access all the .NET Framework components. Maybe a SharePoint, maybe a Silverlight, right? Maybe a ASP.NET Web App, maybe an MVC5 application, or maybe a console application, or maybe a web application. Everything you can access. Everything. Next, with PowerShell we can also access the WMI. WMI is nothing but what? Windows Management Instrumentation. So with this we can access the low level of Windows platform as well. Okay, low level of Windows platform components we can access, and we also can access Windows COM components, component object models, and we also can access the functions in the Windows DLL, dynamic link libraries, right? So if you are coming from a development background, definitely you will create some DLLs, right, for your application. So those DLLs also we can import in the PowerShell files and we can utilize. So this is the greatest benefit that we are going to get. So from a Windows PowerShell file, we can import your DLL and we can call all those functions and we can proceed further. Okay, let's move on. Right. So with the Windows PowerShell, we can access all the components of the Windows platform, right? It can be Active Directory, or it can be a file processing, or it can be a network monitor, or it can be a working with XML files, or it can be a Microsoft Office system, or it can be a SharePoint, or it can be a Exchange server, and anything. So why I am telling you all this stuff? These are a very limited stuff I am going to tell you, because if you are working on Active Directory, right, you can create Active Directory user creations, you can delete user creations, you can reset the password for the users, and you can maintain the GPOs, you can maintain the organization units, you can maintain the DNSS, you can maintain the DHCP, everything you can maintain with the PowerShell. When it comes to the file processing, right, so you can access all the file systems on a file system. You can access all the file systems in a C drive, or you can access all the files in a particular websites in the IIS, or you can access all the MDF and LDF files from a database database folder, right? And if you are when you are working with the network monitor, so we can access the network monitors, and we can see the performances of the different network load level balancers and the failover cluster managers. Everything we can do that. And working with the XML, so this is also a point where generally most of the release engineers will work on, right? Let's say for example, if you are deploying your application into the different environments, right? Dev environment, test environment, prod environment. So you have to configure some specific settings in your configuration files, right? Maybe app.config file or web.config file, right? So if you are deploying in the UAT environment, you have to specify the different connection strings and different settings. And if you are deploying in the production environment, you have to refer different servers and different connection strings, right? So all that XML related automation we can do with the PowerShell as well. And apart from this, yes, we can access the Microsoft Office system, SQL servers, SharePoint and Exchange server and whatnot. When it comes to the SharePoint, Microsoft has given so many command lines to administer the SharePoint. They have given hell lot of command lines for SharePoint administration. So that's why if at all you are working on a SharePoint administration, you have to compulsorily learn PowerShell, and that too full-fledged. Because I have already worked on PowerShell SharePoint deployments, and we have created so many SharePoint forms and SharePoint deployments. So for SharePoint guys, PowerShell is a must and should learn technology to learn it. Okay, now next let's move on. Right. So let's see what is the Windows PowerShell requirement. Okay. So this Windows PowerShell, so currently we are using Windows PowerShell 5.0. Okay. So previously we have PowerShell 4.0 and previously we have PowerShell 3.0. So this PowerShell 4.0 comes with the client operating system 8.1 by default and Windows Server 2012 R2 by default. And it requires a .NET Framework 4.5 and it is compiled against CLR 4.0. And when it comes to the PowerShell 3.0, it is comes with by default Windows 8 client operating system and Windows Server 2012 operating system, and it requires a .NET Framework 4.0 and it is compiled against CLR 4.0. So nowadays we are having Windows PowerShell 5.0. So we all know, right? So each and every version Microsoft is giving so many command lines for us to use. And obviously there is a backward compatibility. So if you write a program in the 4.0, yes, you can utilize in the 5.0, right? So we are not required to worry about that. So currently the one which version we are using is the PowerShell 5.0, and it is by default coming with the Windows Server 2016. Okay, and let's move on. Right. So before writing a PowerShell file, we also have to understand its architecture, right? So how we have to write a PowerShell file and how we have to save a PowerShell file and what happens when we execute a PowerShell file, everything we have to understand, right? So this is the PowerShell architecture. Okay, it is having three components: user experience, engine and managed elements. So now we will try to understand what is each one. So what is user experience? Okay, so a user experience is nothing but it can be a shell, or it can be a language, or it can be a debugger. In other words, a user experience is nothing but a user who is executing a PowerShell file and from where he is executing that. So when it comes to the shell, a user can execute a PowerShell file from a shell, from a PowerShell command line, or a user can execute a PowerShell file from a language, maybe a .NET language, right? A user can use a PowerShell file or PowerShell logic in a .NET DLL and he can execute the PowerShell file from there, or a debugger, maybe a utility, or maybe exe file, or maybe a Windows exe file, right? So a user experience is nothing but the place where a user is executing the PowerShell file. Okay, and when a user execute a PowerShell file, so where it will goes? It will goes to the engine, which is nothing but our second component. A engine is nothing but like a .NET framework, which is having so many APIs and so many execution contexts and so many object managers and security managers and so on. So the role of an engine is to take the calls from a user experience or a user and forward it to the further down layers, which is nothing but the managed elements. In the managed elements, we are having different further components. Maybe we are having different command lines, we are having the WMI components, we are having COM components, we are having .NET, we are having XML, we are having ADO components, we have ADSI components and native commands and further. So the engine will decide where it has to redirect the calls from a user to the managed elements. Right? Let's say for example, if you write a program to communicate with your databases, let's say for example Microsoft SQL Server. So when you call a program, the engine will decide and it will redirect your calls to the ADO components. And if you write a program to retrieve all the Windows registries, so the engine will decide and will redirect your call to the WMI components. So this is a slide where we have to understand how a program calls will happen. Okay? Yeah, let's move on. Right. So this is one of the slides which I like most, even because this Windows PowerShell is heavily used by the administrators. So if you are using a link server or a SharePoint server or a service manager or Windows Small Business Server or Exchange servers or Active Directory or Internet Information Services or SCOM or SCCM or AppLock or WMI or group policies, anything to that matter. If at all you are related to an administrator, and if you are fall into administrator category, you have to compulsorily learn PowerShell to do the automation, because if there is no automation, definitely on one day we will not have our jobs, right? So we have to learn the PowerShell for doing the automation, and if you are administrator, definitely you have to learn it. Okay, let's move on. Yes. So in this PowerShell slide, we are going to discuss about the more features of the PowerShell. So I can say this is a universal automation environment. Let's see the points here. So with the PowerShell, you can write an interactive or programmatic applications, right? So interactive means what? You can develop application which is having user interfaces, graphical user interfaces, or programmatical. Programmatical is nothing but the jobs which you can run in a background. So PowerShell allows you to develop applications either in an interactive way or in a programmatic way. Right. Next, it allows you to develop applications in the foreground or in the background. It is more or less similar to the first point, right? If you want to schedule a programs in the task scheduler, or if you want to schedule periodically a particular programs, let's say for example Windows patching, right? Or if you want to reboot some machines very periodically, then you can set in the background level. So Windows PowerShell allows you to develop applications either in a foreground or in the background. Next, local or remote. It allows you to perform the operations on the local machines or the remote machines. Right? For the administrators, we will be having minimum hundreds of servers. If you are an Active Directory administrator, or if you are a Windows Server administrator, or if you are a DB administrator, or if you are a SharePoint administrator, or if you are an IAS administrator, or if you are a build and release administrator, or if you are an AWS administrator, right? We will be having multiple machines. So we have to do the tasks on the multiple machines. I will tell you an example. Let's say for example, if you are in a IAS deployments administrators, okay, or a build and release administrator, after deploying your application into 20 of your servers, you may need to require to IAS reset, or you may need to require to stop and start a particular Windows services, right? So if there is no automation, if there is no PowerShell file, We have to log into each and every 20 of the servers, and we have to go to the IIS, we have to do an IIS reset. We have to go to the Windows service, we have to do a stop and then again start into all those 20 services. 20 servers, right? Very time consuming. But with the PowerShell, you can able to do that in a single click. So that is the advantages of the PowerShell, right? Single machine or multiple machines, it allows us to perform the operations. Next, synchronous or asynchronous. Synchronous or asynchronous means if you want to do some jobs parallelly, yes, you can do with PowerShell. Or if you want to do some jobs with one after another, yes, you can do that one as well. So this is also one of the greatest features of the PowerShell. Next, in the unrestricted or unrestricted environments. Let's say, for example, if you are running in the banks where the compliance teams and where the security is very higher, right? So in those environments or in those domains, we can keep the PowerShell settings, right, to a restricted environment, to an unrestricted environment. In a restricted environment, you can able to execute the PowerShell files only a signed PowerShell files only you can execute. In an unrestricted environment, you can able to execute all the PowerShell files. Generally, in the banks, where in the banks and the domains where we maintain the highest level of security, it is a restricted. Meaning, we can able to execute the PowerShell files only signed by that particular company or by a particular third-party provider certificates, right? So in that way, it provides so much of security for us. Next, it also provides various range of authenticating mechanisms. So it will provide a Windows level of authentication, and we can do authentications, and then only we are able to connect to the different servers and perform the operations. And finally, it is a simple scripting to the systems programming. It is a simple scripting tool to systems programming. Yes, it is very easy to learn if you are a beginner or if you are advanced or if you are an expert level. See, to learn a PowerShell, we don't need any of the basics. We don't need any of your programming experience. If you are a beginner, yes, you can still learn the PowerShell very easily and very conveniently, I can say. Because in the .NET, let's say for example, if you are learning C, C++, Java or .NET, you have to learn so much of things. You have to understand the data types, integer, float, character, double. You have to understand the syntaxes. You have to be much more careful with the cases, case sensitives, and everything. But in PowerShell, you don't need any. You are not required to declare an integer variable or a float variable or a character variable or a character array variable. Nothing. It is a very simple scripting tool, and you can easily learn. So if you are even a beginner, don't worry, it is a very easy. Just to practice few of the examples, and definitely you are going to get a good experience about it, and you will definitely gain confidence to write your PowerShell files. Let's move on. Right. So Windows PowerShell introduction. Right. So when you write a PowerShell program, either on a client operating system or on a server operating system, you can execute PowerShell file in two ways. One is at the PowerShell command prompt, and another one is at the ISC, PowerShell ISC. Right. So if you are a beginner, I strongly recommend you to write your PowerShell programs in the ISC, Windows PowerShell ISC, and save it and then execute. Because when you write PowerShell programs in the ISC, it allows you to debug your code. You can put some breakpoints and you can debug the code. In that way, you will get really so much of confidence on how to write a program or how to debug a program, and what is the process to debug a program, and everything will come to know. Not only that, let's see the first point. if you are using the ISE, it will provide intelligence for commandlets and parameters with parameter help pop-up. Okay, so in the PowerShell, like in the .NET as well, it will provide the intelligence, right? So if you declare any of your variables, or if there are any commandlets already available, then it will show with that intelligence. You can select them and you can write your code and you can proceed further. Okay, next, intelligence will also provide values for the parameters based on the enumerations and predefined sets. So if there are any enumerations, it will provide, and it will list down all the functions, it will list down all the variables, and it will list down all the commandlets, and that is really very helpful for us to write a program. Next, it will also show the matching commandlet names. Intelligence will also show the path options for the file systems and previous providers. Intelligence will show the variables, and intelligence show for object parameters and methods and every available. So all these things I am going to explain you in the next program. So if at all you are a beginner, try to open an ISE and start your programs. So I am again repeating that to learn a PowerShell, you don't need any of your programmatical experience. You don't need C language, you don't need C++, Java, .NET, anything. As a beginner, you can still start and you can do it. Okay, let's move on. Right. So with the PowerShell, it's a programming language. Okay, and it is also an object-oriented language and interactive command platform for the Microsoft Windows. So here it will show different colors, right? So the folders it will show in a yellow symbol, and command it will show in a blue symbol, and file or item it will show in that icon symbol. So all these things will be helpful in the ISE whenever we are writing a PowerShell file. Okay, let's move on. Yeah, so these are also the PowerShell features. Okay, so PowerShell provides so many commandlets. Okay, commandlet is nothing but a very small .NET classes that appear as system commands. So a commandlet is nothing but a PowerShell program. Okay, so because all this is a theoretical concept that you have to understand, that I mean to say that each and everyone has to understand, then only we can easily jump into the programs and we can easily write. Right, so it provides scripts. Scripts are nothing but which are combination of commandlets and associated logic. So you can write some commandlets and you can write some scripts and you can further implementing your logic. Next, executables. Executables are nothing but the .ps1 files. You can import the .ps1 files into the another ps1 files and you can implement there. Next, instantiation of standard .NET classes. Yes, we can create objects to the .NET classes. We can import the .NET DLLs into the PowerShell files, and we can create the objects for them, and we can consume all those facilities and the functionalities. And it is integration with the Microsoft .NET environment. Yes, and PowerShell is object based but not text based. So as I told you, this is a very important point. So PowerShell is object based. Because of this, really our efforts are very minimized in writing a PowerShell file. So whenever you are writing a program, you have to understand that PowerShell returns objects. Okay, PowerShell returns objects. What is that? Everything I am going to explain you. Next, PowerShell commands are customizable. You can customize your PowerShell commands. And scripts are very easy to use, share, support, and safe to operate. Okay, so we are going to discuss about all these things in an example as well. Okay, So now let me show you. Let me show you how to start a PowerShell file. Okay. So when you type PowerShell, right here it will show all these things. PowerShell run command, PowerShell, Windows PowerShell, and here it will show PowerShell ISC. There are two different ways to execute a PowerShell file. Either you can execute at the PowerShell directly run command prompt or directly at the Windows PowerShell ISC. If at all you are a beginner to the PowerShell, I strongly recommend to open the ISC and execute it. Okay, I will show you both things here. So this is as a run as administrator. Okay, so this is run as administrator. So here we can execute the command list. Let's say for example get -service. So it will return all the services which are running on our local machine. Okay. Okay. So this is one way, and the second way is what? ISC, because here you cannot debug any particular program. You cannot understand the flow of control when you run a particular PowerShell file or logic at the directly command prompt. Okay. Let me open the ISC now. PowerShell ISC, Windows PowerShell ISC, right? Run as administrator. And open run as administrator. See, Windows PowerShell ISC. It will provide an interface for us. It will provide a graphical user interface for us where you can declare your variables, where you can start your program, and you can move on. So this is what Windows PowerShell ISC. Okay, Windows PowerShell ISC. So whenever you are writing a PowerShell file, first of all, it is always recommended to save your file. Okay, now I am going to save our file. Okay, I am going to save our file as a hello world. Hello world. Okay, so while saving our PowerShell file, we are not required to give our extension. The default extension of any PowerShell file is .ps1. All the PowerShell files will be having a extension of .ps1. Okay, now let's save this particular file. Now we have saved the PowerShell file, right? So in this example, I am going to teach you the very basics, how to put comments in a PowerShell file, single line comments, multi-line comments, and how to see what are the command lines and how to debug a particular program. Everything I am going to teach you. So this is a very basic program. If at all you are a complete beginner, I strongly recommend to do in the same way. So what we have done, simply we have started a PowerShell ISC. We have saved our file with a hello world.ps1. We are not required to give the extension. The extension will be automatically given by the PowerShell ISC. Okay. Now, whenever you are writing a program, it is always a good practice to start with the help, okay, or comments I can say. So first of all, write this program helps us in understanding what are command lines and how to use them, right? If you want to provide another command, also provides how to troubleshooting. Okay, so I have saved it. So if you want to provide any comments, use hash symbol at the beginning. So when you use the hash symbol at the beginning, the PowerShell console will skip execution of that part. Okay, and this commands or help files will really helps us in understanding what we are going to do in this program or at that particular line. Okay, so this program helps us in understanding what are commandlets and how to use them. Okay, let's see. Let's go back to our commandlets. See, right? So in PowerShell, a commandlet is nothing but a program. Okay, so we have get-alias, get-help, get-command, get-service, get-process, get-child item, and so on. So all these are the commandlets. Okay, let's complete the first theoretical process, then I am going to directly explain you in a programmatic way. Next. Yeah, this is also very important slide. If at all you are a beginner, definitely please take down of all these points. Okay. So if you are the beginner, we have to understand how our program is going to execute, right? Line by line, line by line. So to do that, we can debug a PowerShell script. So to debug a script, the process is, first of all we have to put a breakpoint. But first of all we have to put a breakpoint. So how we have to put the breakpoint? By pressing the F9 key. So when you click on the F9 key, a breakpoint will be set. After that, we have to execute our program. So while executing the program, our program will halt at our breakpoint. Then again we have to decide to click on F10 or F11. If you click on F11, it will navigate to the line by line debugging, and it is the recommended for the beginners. If you are a beginner, always click on F11. It will really help you in understanding how the logic is going on, how the flow is going on of your PowerShell file. If you gain a bit of confidence on your program, then you can press F10. Then you can you can just hang over to the next level. So these F9, F10 and F11 keys are very important to debug a program. So why debugging is important? Why debugging is necessary for a PowerShell developers? As I already informed you, right? In one of my previous projects, in one PowerShell file, we have 3000 lines of code. We don't know what that 3000 lines of code, what is the dependency, on which line will be executing or which function will be executing, what is the dependency, what is the order, we don't know. So how to know that? We have to put a breakpoint at the beginning, and you have to press F11 and so on. So when you are pressing F11, the process or the control is taking you to the next level. In that way, you can learn how the program is executing, how the flow is executing, what is the workflow, what is the control flow, everything you can execute, you can understand. Okay, so it is very much essential to debug a code if you are a beginner or if you are advanced or even if you are an expert level. Okay, now let's switch over back to the PowerShell ISE and see. Okay, so in this program we are going to see about what are the commandlets and how to use them. Okay, so first of all I will show you get-service, right? So when I type get-service, the ISE is showing all the commandlets with its IntelliSense, right? These are all the points that which I have discussed just now in the PPT, theoretical concepts. See, it is showing get-service, right? When it is showing get-service, you can simply press tab button. You are not required to type the full word or the full commandlet name. Just simply press get-service, right? So it is showing the get commandlet. So get-service is one commandlet. Get-service is one commandlet which will return all the services. Okay, now we have written get-service and we have saved it. Let's execute it. See, it is returning all the services. It is returning all the services in my local machine. I will give you a couple of examples for the commandlets. Let's see, get-process. Now let's execute this get-process. Now let's come into this particular get-service. because my main agenda in this PowerShell demo sessions or this video is I want you to make the perfect programmer. That is how to declare a variables, how to comment a particular lines, how to debug a particular program, everything, the best standards, right? So since now we are understanding about get-process, I am telling you how to comment a particular line of code. So each and everything you have to learn, each and everything you can observe and you can understand, and all these things will help you in one way or in one day to debug a code or to debug a fix. Okay, now we have commented get-service commandlet, and now we are executing the get-process. See, it is returning all the get-processes, right? Get-processes. Similarly, you can execute both as well, get-service and get-process, right? So it is showing all the get-services and get-processes. And also, whenever you are writing a program in the ISE, better to use CLS. CLS means what it will do? It will clear the screen. It will clear the screen. Okay, now let's comment this one and try to execute this one. See, it cleared the screen and freshly it populated the get-service, and you can see what are the services, right? Adobe RM services, Azure router services, ALG, app host SVC, and what is the status of the service, running or stopped, etc. So these are the commandlets. Okay, with these commandlets we can communicate with the Windows machines, and we can communicate with any of the services, either file over cluster managers or Active Directories or AWS entries or Microsoft Azure or SharePoint or IIS or Microsoft SQL Server, anything we can communicate with these services and use these commandlets, and we can perform our operations. Okay, now let's see how to get familiar with the commandlets. There is a commandlet called get-command. So when you press with get-command, it will list down all the commandlets. On a Windows machine. So here you can understand. What are all the different commandlets. See, it will provide. Let me comment this one. Now execute. Right? See, add-provisioned Apex package, and this is version 3.0. Source is and it is a alias. Next, flush-volume. Next, add-BitLocker key protector. Right? Clear disk. Disable -DSSC debug. Right? All these are the predefined commandlets. So if you are performing any task, first of all check if there is commandlet available or not. If there is no commandlet available, then you have to go and write your particular function or your particular commandlet. Or if commandlet is already available there, means you can directly use it. Okay. And with this get-commandlet, you can also do filtering. Let's say, for example, I want to get all the commandlets which are starting with the get let's say, for example, service. See, have you observed? So we are doing the filtering. get-SCR ** we have given. ** nothing but like for filtering, right? Wildcard character. So this get-command will give you only those commandlets which are having this get-SCR word service. Now it return one value, get-service, right? So how does it helps us? Let's say, for example, if you are writing AWS, right? AWS commandlets, you may be writing, because AWS is also providing so many services, right? EC2 service, RDS service, S3 bucket service, or DNS service, Route 53 service and everything. And you are very much particular to interested to deal with only EC2 instances, or you are very much particular to deal with only RDS services, and you want to know only those commandlets, then you can write get-command, right? Get-command EC2, so that it will list down all the commandlets which are helpful to interact with the EC2 service. Get-command RDS. This will give you all the commandlets which will be helpful to deal with the AWS RDS, right? Then you can understand, so what commandlets we can use, how to use them, what is the properties, what is the syntax, how to call a particular what parameters we have to pass, everything you have to understand in that way, because these are very basic things and very must know things to write a program, because all these things will definitely help you. Okay, and one more thing, you should also get familiar with this ISC tool. Okay, let's say for example, now here we have almost 14 lines of code, right? If you want to execute your full code, if you want to execute all these 14 lines of code, you have to press this green button. When you execute this green button, it will give you all the it will execute all the lines of your code. It will execute all your code. Okay, let's say for example, I want to execute only this 14th line, or I want to execute only this 11th line. If you want to execute only a particular line, simply select that particular line and execute this one, run selection part, or press F8 key. So it will execute only that particular code. Okay, let's say for example, I want to execute CLS. I will execute only CLS. I want to execute only last line. I will simply select that one and I will execute that one. Right? So these are the basic stuff that we have to learn, how to do the steps. Okay, so you also simply write, you also simply try to execute what is the get-command and try to execute that one, get-command. So it is showing everything. Now try to filter that are there any commandlets which are having EC2 word? There are no commandlets. Are there any commandlets which are having RDS word? Yes, there is one exe file replication with the RDS. Okay, now few more commandlets. Get-alias. Get-alias is the commandlet which will give you the aliases. Aliases is nothing but shortcut names, right? So this will help you much more. This will take you to the another level of writing a scripts or understanding the scripts, because sometimes we will use percentile symbol in PowerShell scripts. Sometimes we will use question mark symbols. So percentile is nothing but for each object. Question mark is nothing but where -object commandlet. AC is nothing but add-content. CD is nothing but set location. CP is nothing but copy-commandlet. So these are the aliases which are nothing but synonyms. So where you will find all these things means, if you have already your PowerShell files which your team has already written, maybe 1000 lines of code or 3000 lines of code, there you can observe all these symbols. If someone is using all these symbols means, I can say that he is in the advanced level of PowerShell script writing, because the beginners cannot use this percentile, question mark, CP commandlets, CURL and diff, everything. The beginners cannot do this. Only the advanced level of programmers can do this, and you can identify all these aliases in your PowerShell files which are already existing. Okay, so get-alias. You also try to explore. You spend some time in the initial days and try to explore something. What is the get-command and what is the get-alias command? How to filter a particular commandlets and everything. Okay. Now I am going to tell you about one more command, get-help. This is very much needed command, get hyphen help command. So this get hyphen help commandlet is used to get help about a particular command. Let's say for example we want to get about get hyphen service. Okay, let's comment all the lines. Let's comment all the commandlets. Okay, now we want to use get hyphen service commandlet, but we don't know how to use that, right? We want to get some help. We want to get some help about get hyphen help. Right. See, when you press this get hyphen help, get hyphen service, or get hyphen help any particular command. So this get hyphen help commandlet is used to get the help about any particular commandlet in the PowerShell. Maybe a third party commandlet also. Let's say for example you are dealing with the AWS EC2 instances and you don't know how to use a particular commandlet, or you are dealing with an AWS RDS commandlet. You don't know how to use that commandlet. You don't know what parameters you have to pass them. You don't know how to use that commandlet, right? Then you can use get hyphen help commandlet to get help about that particular command. Now see here, it will show you when I say get help get hyphen service, it is showing the name is get hyphen service. It gets the system on a local or a remote computer, right? And what is its syntax? Get hyphen service, and it will take hyphen name. So hyphen name is one parameter, hyphen computer name is one parameter, hyphen dependent services is one parameter. So all these things are different syntaxes. Get hyphen service you can call in this way, get hyphen service you can call in this way, get hyphen service you can call in this way, right? And also description it will give you. The get hyphen service commandlet gets objects that represents the service on a local computer or on a remote computer, including running and stopped services. You can direct this commandlet to get only particular services by specifying the service name or display name of the services. You can pipe service objects to this commandlet. So now you got some idea, right? How to use this get hyphen service commandlet and everything. Okay, so this is one way. Next one is okay, still you want to get more help. Okay, if you want to still get more help, there is a detailed is there. There is a command called detail. You use detail commandlet, detailed switch. So it will give you some examples also here. It will give you some examples also here. Get hyphen detail, right? Get hyphen help, and one more thing is also service hyphen full is there, full. So if you want to get more and more help, if you want to get more examples, if you want to get, see, he has given example 11 examples have been given in the get hyphen service. So even you are a beginner, even if you don't know how to use a particular commandlet, just to go with the get hyphen help commandlet. It will help you really a lot. How to pass these switches. See, get hyphen service, hyphen name, WinRM, hyphen computer, localhost, server 01, server 02, and format table. He is doing formatting. So what he is doing? He is trying to get a Windows service with the name WinRM from multiple computers, from localhost, from server 01 and server 02. After getting all these particular services data, we are doing formatting. So always use get hyphen help commandlet whenever you don't know anything, or whenever you want to know something more about a particular commandlet. Okay. So in this PowerShell file, we have seen how to start a PowerShell file, right? How to start a PowerShell file, how to save a PowerShell file, and what is the extension of a PowerShell file, and how to comment a particular line, how to start your PowerShell file with the comments and the details, how to clear the screen, and what are the commandlets, how to get about the help about the commandlets, and what are the aliases and everything, right? Now I want to give you few more points, technical points here. if you want to comment a single line, just use this is hash symbol. Okay, this is a single line. This is a single line comment. So when you put this hash operator here, it will comment only that particular line. Now let's say for example, what happens if you want to do a multiple, let's say for example you have so many lines of code and you want to comment multiple lines, then you can use slash hash multiple comments, right? So you can use this one for a multi-line comments. So the color should change whenever you use multi-line comments. The color should change. Here it is not changing in this IDE, but the IDE should change here. Okay. So this is way to give multi-line comments. Next, and next important point is PowerShell is not case sensitive, meaning you can write get-service, okay, get-service, or you can write some capital letters also you can write, no problem. Or you can mix both also, get-service. So all these are one and the same. So you can write the command likes or variables or anything. All your code in the PowerShell is not case sensitive. So you are not required to worry about whether it is uppercase or whether it is lowercase. Why I am telling is that because generally all programming languages starting from C, C++, .NET, Java, everything is case sensitive, but PowerShell is not case sensitive. So if you are coming from an automation background, development background, or test environment background, so this is a point where you are not required to worry about. So you can write anything. Okay. So yeah, this is a way how to give multi-line comments and case sensitive. Now let's see one more example. In this example, I am going to show you how to debug a code. So now our file name is what? Debugging.ps1. Whenever you are writing a PowerShell file, always try to give some comment so that it will help you. Okay, demo on debugging with F9, F10 and F11 switches. Okay, and CLS, the name CLS. So here I am writing get-service, right? You already know what is get-service and what it will do. So now let's execute it. Get-service. So it has retrieved all the services objects and it written. Right. Now we want to also retrieve about processes. We also want to get about all the processes. So when you execute together here, see, first of all it is returning all the services and then it is returning all the processes, right? It is returning all the processes. Now I want to debug. If you want to debug a program or a code, first of all you must save your particular file. The first and foremost step is you have to save a file with the .ps1. Without saving you cannot debug a code or you cannot debug a PowerShell file. The first and foremost step is you have to save a file. Right, now we have saved it. Next, take your cursor to a place where you want to put a breakpoint. Now I want to put a breakpoint in the place in the line number 7. Okay, and then press F9. When you click on F9, it will keep a breakpoint there. Okay, and it will turn into a brown color here. You can observe that, right? So when you execute the program now, your program flow or the control flow will halt there, and then you have to decide. How we have to go further. If you go for the F10, and if you go for the F11. Okay. Now let's click on the execution. See, now it is not directly displaying all the services. Why it is not directly displaying? Because we have already kept a breakpoint there with the F9 key. Right? Now simply press F10. See, now it is displaying all the services, and now again it halted at the get- process. Right? Now again press F10. Now again it displayed all the process, right? So in this way it is very useful how to put a breakpoints and how to execute a particular program. Okay, now let's say for example I want to write a hello message. Welcome to PowerShell. So write hyphen host is also one of the predefined command lines. So in PowerShell we have so many command lines as how we have discussed outline, right? So how to know all those command lines? You can simply type get hyphen command and you can just explore what are all the predefined command lines. How to execute a portion of your file? Just select that one and press this F8 key or this one. In this way you can execute only a portion of that particular program, not at the particular full program. Okay. Now we want to execute the full program and we want to put a breakpoint at the let's say for example we want to remove the breakpoint. So if you want to put a breakpoint, press F9. If you want to remove also a breakpoint, again press F9. Okay. Now we want to put a breakpoint at the key line number 10. So just take the cursor over there and press F9 there. Okay, now breakpoint is there. So when we execute our program halts at the line number 10. Let's see. So it is directly displaying all the services, it is directly displaying all the processes, and now it is halted at the line number 10. You also can see this one, hit line breakpoint on the line number 10. Now we are at the here, right? Now press F10. See, this one is executed. Welcome to PowerShell is executed. Now the breakpoint is at the line number 13, right? So it is not directly displaying all the command lines. When you press F10, then only it will display, or when you press F11, then only it will display. Now I am pressing F11 here. See, it is displaying all the command lines over here. See, are you able to see here the red color square button? So this red color square button means our program is in execution state. Our program is in execution state. When our program is in execution state, you cannot modify that particular program. Once after completion of all your program, this red color square bracket will turn into green color. I will show you. As long as our program is executing, it will be in the red color square bracket. Let's see. Square button. So if you are a beginner, definitely try to understand how to put the comments and how to put the breakpoints, how to debug a particular program and everything. See, now this red color symbol is not showing, right? Red color button is no more appearing here, meaning it is completed. Our operation is completed. Okay. So in this way you can put the breakpoints with the F9 key, F10 key and F11 key, and you can furthermore debug your program. Okay. So after this session I try to give few more assignments to you to get more familiarity, to get more hands-on this PowerShell. Okay, simply create a PowerShell file, save the PowerShell file, and put some comments, single line comments, multi-line comments, try to retrieve all the services, try to retrieve all the processes, and try to display welcome to PowerShell on the window, and try to put the breakpoints, and try to execute only a part of your program, and try to execute the full program, try to execute a part of the program by selecting that everything. So all these points will definitely give you a good hands-on experience, and in the further classes or in the further sessions I'm going to teach you about the further operators, the data types, and what is what and everything. With that, still you can get more confidence, and you can build your programs. Okay, now let's go back to the sites what we have seen today. So today we have seen all these things, right? What is PowerShell and why you should learn PowerShell, right? Who should compulsory learn PowerShell? See, PowerShell is for automation. PowerShell is for automation. If you are administrator background, if you are in the DB administrator, Azure administrator, AWS administrator, DevOps engineer, cloud engineer, deployment engineer, DB administrator, PowerShell is compulsory for you. And to learn PowerShell, you don't need any requirements. You don't need any C language, C++, .NET, Java backgrounds or anything. Nothing. Okay. So the best way to learn PowerShell is just to practice. Just to practice the way how we have shown in the previous slides. Just to practice. If you just practice 5 to 6 sessions, that's it. You will get a good experience, and you will be easily, you can turn over to advanced scripter, right? So, and we have also seen what makes PowerShell unique when compared with the other scripting tools, right? The other scripting tools like DOS and Python are not object based, and not object oriented, and not integrated with the .NET framework. But PowerShell is completely object oriented. PowerShell is completely built upon the .NET framework. This is the single point which makes PowerShell unique from other scripting languages and makes PowerShell more robust in performing their operations and automations. And we have seen the PowerShell architecture, we have seen the PowerShell commandlets, we have seen the predefined basic commandlets like get-service, get-process, get-command, get-alias and everything, right? We also have seen how to debug a code, F9, F10, F11 examples. So I'm going to give the assignments to you. Assignment 1 is explore on what are the predefined commandlets and their aliases, and the second assignment is identify what is the execution policy on your server and try to change it. Sorry, I forgot one point to tell you. Because when you start a PowerShell file on a brand new machine, okay, you have to understand one thing. You have to see the get-execution policy. See, get-execution policy. Get-execution policy is unrestricted, right? Since get-execution policy is unrestricted, you can execute any PowerShell file here. Okay. When we can set execution policy also, because by default the execution policy is restricted. If it is restricted, you cannot change, you cannot execute any PowerShell file on a brand new machine. Then you have to change the execution policy. Okay, execution policy to, so you can change execution policy to unrestricted or undefined. If you change to an unrestricted, then you can execute your PowerShell files. So this is the one of the issue that you will execute on a brand new machine. If it is a brand new machine, it is always recommended to check the execution policy. Let's say for example, you have built a 10 web servers for the IaaS deployments. So those are the 10 web servers are the brand new machines, right? In those new machines, the execution policy by default will be restricted. So you have to set manually that one to the unrestricted in order to execute a PowerShell file. If the PowerShell file, if it is restricted, means you cannot execute any PowerShell file on that particular machine. Okay, you have to set the execution policy and also try to get the what is the execution policy on your machine and everything. If you want to get, see, this get-execution policy is also a commandlet. Get-execution policy is also a commandlet. If you want to get more help about the commandlet, right, you can write here also get-help about what? About get-execution policy. It will written the stuff like this. Okay, so this is the assignment for you. Okay, explore on what are the predefined commandlets and their aliases, and identify what is the execution policy on your server and try to change it. So I hope and I believe that you got a little knowledge on the PowerShell, how to start a PowerShell program, how to give commands, and how to debug the code, and why PowerShell is different from other programming languages, and what makes PowerShell unique, and who should compulsorily learn PowerShell with all this session. And we will continue in the next sessions